I'm Helen Davenport, 70 years old, and I found out what I was worth to my daughter through a kitchen wall. It's an old house. The wall between the kitchen and the back hall thin as a cracker. I was rinsing a teacup one night when I heard Bree laughing on the other side, talking to her husband, not knowing I was 3 feet away. "Relax," she said. "Mom's useful until the inheritance clears. Then we move her to Pinewood and the house is ours. Useful until the inheritance clears." I didn't cry. I set the cup in the rack, dried my hands, and went up to bed. And the next morning, I started doing math because I taught math for 34 years, and a number has never once lied to me the way a person can. 2 weeks later, I packed one suitcase, changed the locks, and by morning I was gone. She still doesn't know where. And what I did with that inheritance before I left the thing she was so patiently waiting to clear is the part she never saw coming. Stay with me. Some women cry. Some women calculate. Welcome back to Mom's Sweet Revenge, where quiet women finally say the loud part out loud. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Let me take you back to how my daughter ended up in my kitchen in the first place. My husband, Gerald, died 8 months before that night at the sink. 44 years and then a Tuesday in March when he didn't wake up. The house got very quiet after that. You don't know how loud a marriage is until it stops. I'd reach for the second coffee cup out of habit and stand there holding it. A 70-year-old woman in a kitchen that had forgotten how to make noise. So when Bree offered to move in, just for a while, Mom, to help, I said yes before she finished asking. I told myself I was lucky. A daughter who wanted to be near me. A house with footsteps in it again. I didn't see what I was actually doing, which was filling a silence with people who'd come to wait, not to stay. There was a suitcase in the upstairs closet, the good hard shell one Gerald and I used to take on our anniversary trips. I'd see it every time I reached for towels. I didn't know yet that it was about to become the most important thing I owned. At the time, it just looked like luggage that had nowhere left to go. That made 2 of us, I suppose. That's what Bree thought anyway. A mother and a suitcase both were tired from going anywhere. She was wrong about the suitcase. She was wrong about me. The inheritance Bree was waiting for came from my sister. Marguerite was 5 years older than me and twice as bold. Never married. No children, ran a little bookkeeping practice out of a storefront downtown for 40 years and saved every dime she didn't spend on travel. She went to Lisbon at 60, Patagonia at 68. She used to send me postcards with 3 words on the back, "Go somewhere, Nell." Nell was her name for me. Nobody else ever called me that. She died 3 months after Gerald. It was a brutal year. The 2 people who knew me longest gone in a single winter. Marguerite left almost everything to me. After her little house sold and the account settled, it came to about $480,000. It was working its way through probate that spring. Clearing the lawyers call it that slow process where money stops being a dead woman's and becomes a living one's. She also left me one thing that wasn't money. A small brass compass, the kind that actually works heavy and cold in your palm. There was a note in the box. "For when you finally take a trip without asking permission, go somewhere, Nell." I kept it on my dresser and didn't think much about it. I was a widow living in a quiet house. I wasn't going anywhere. But here's the thing about a math teacher. I spent 34 years watching teenagers try to convince me that 2 + 2 could be 5 if they wanted it badly enough. I've always been good with a number that won't lie, and my family, it turned out, was about to hand me a problem I could solve in my sleep. Bree and her husband, Chad, moved in within a month of Marguerite's funeral, which I should have noticed and didn't because grief makes you grateful for the wrong things. Bree is 39. She's good at the look of love. She posted a photo of herself bringing me tea, captioned, "Caring for my mama in this season, family is everything," and got 200 hearts. She did not mention that the tea was the 3rd thing she'd done for me that month, or that she'd spent the visit on her phone. Chad is 41 and quieter, which I mistook for kindness. He's an accounts manager of some kind, the sort of man who reads a room like a balance sheet. Within 2 weeks, he had offered to help with the bills, which meant my mail started arriving already opened, sorted into piles only he understood. "Just simplifying things for you, Helen," he said. I let him. I thought it was thoughtful. They took over the kitchen, the good chairs, the thermostat. I became a guest in the house Gerald and I had paid off in 1998. I'd come downstairs and feel like I should knock, and they asked gently, constantly about the money. When did the estate close? Had the lawyer given a date? Was it all coming at once or in pieces? Bree framed it as concern. We just want to make sure you're protected, Mom. Chad framed it as logistics. Patrice, that's Chad's mother who started appearing on weekends, framed it as wisdom. 3 different framings. One question asked over and over in 100 soft voices. When does the money come in? I answered vaguely and watched their faces fall just slightly every time. Patrice Hale is 66 and treats other people's money as a group project. She started coming by to keep me company, which meant sitting at my table, steering every conversation toward estate planning. At your age, Helen, you really should get everything settled. You don't want the government taking half. And she said settled the way a fisherman says reel it in. She brought a folder of her own once brochures. Just things to think about. I didn't open it then. I should have. The one bright spot in that house was Ivy Bree and Chad's daughter, 8 years old, all knees and questions. She'd climb into my lap and ask me to explain why the moon follows the car. She called the compass Grandma's treasure and liked to hold it flat and watch the needle swing north. She was the only person in that house who wanted something from me that wasn't a signature. I'd catch myself watching the 3 adults talk over Ivy's head about the estate and the timeline and feel something cold settle in. They kept using the word we about my money. We should move it here. We need to plan. We'll handle it, Mom. Don't you worry. It was my sister's life savings, my husband's house, my 34 years of teacher's pension underneath it, and somewhere along the line, in their mouths, all of it had quietly become we. I didn't say anything. I've learned that the most useful thing a person can be in a room full of people who underestimate her is quiet. Quiet looks like agreement. Agreement makes people careless, and careless people talk through thin kitchen walls. It was a Thursday in April, near 11 o'clock at night. I'd come down for tea because sleep doesn't come easy when half your bed is empty. The kitchen light was off. I like the dark. I know that room by heart. Bree and Chad were in the back hall on the other side of that cracker-thin wall, thinking the whole downstairs was asleep. People forget that walls are not doors. Sound doesn't need an invitation. I heard Chad first low, "Did she say when it clears? End of the month, maybe sooner." Bree, easy a little bored. The lawyer told her 2 to 4 weeks. "And you really think she'll move it into the joint setup without a fuss?" A laugh. My daughter's laughs. The one I taught her to do at birthday parties. Chad, relax. A cabinet closed. Mom's useful until the inheritance clears. She makes dinner, she watches Ivy, whatever. Then the money's in, we get the house put in our name for estate reasons, and we move her to Pinewood. The shared room's fine. She won't fight it. She never fights anything. You sure? She's been a doormat her whole life. She's not going to start at 70. I stood in my dark kitchen with a cold teacup in my hand, and I listened to my only child sort me into a category useful until... I want to tell you my heart broke. Something quieter than that happened. A door closed in me softly the way a vault closes, not slammed, just sealed final with a sound only I could hear. I did not cry. I did not go in there. I rinsed the cups so they wouldn't know I'd been down, and I climbed the stairs and I lay in the dark and I began very calmly to do the math. The next morning I made pancakes. I want you to sit with that because it's the whole strategy. I came downstairs, kissed Ivy on the head, and made pancakes for the people who decided I belonged in the cheaper wing of a place called Pinewood. Bree said, "You're in a good mood." I said I slept well. Chad asked lightly if I'd thought any more about letting him help organize the accounts. "I think that's a good idea," I said, and watched his shoulders relax. 34 years in a classroom teaches you one thing above all others. Never let the class know you've already graded the test. The student who thinks he's getting away with something writes everything down. He shows you his whole method. He hands you the evidence while he's still smirking. So I smiled. I agreed in principle with everything and committed to nothing. I let them believe the doormat was exactly where they'd left her. Inside, I was already gone. Not dramatically. I didn't rage. Rage is a cold that burns your own hand. What I felt was clarity. The cold, clean kind. I used to feel grading finals at midnight when the noise of the day fell away and there was only the problem and the solution and the quiet space between them. The problem was simple. My family was waiting for a number to clear so they could take it and take the house and file me away. The solution was simpler. I just had to make sure that when the number cleared, there was nothing for them to take and no doormat left at the door. I needed a lawyer my own, not the one Chad kept recommending. Ruth Castellano had drawn up Gerald's and my wills 9 years earlier. She's about 58, blunt as a hammer, and she does not suffer fools, which is exactly what you want in the woman holding your paperwork. I told her I needed to come in, not on the phone. She heard something in my voice and cleared an afternoon. I sat in her office and I told her all of it. The move-in, the open mail, the wee pinewood, the wall. I told it flat, no tears. The way you read a word problem aloud before you solve it. Ruth listened without interrupting. Then she set down her pen. Helen, she said, I'm to tell you the good news, and then we're going to be very quiet about it. Right now, today, everything is still yours. The inheritance hasn't moved into any joint account. The house is in your name alone. Gerald left it to you outright. You haven't signed a single thing. She leaned forward, which means we have a window, and in that window, we can make all of it untouchable quietly before anyone knows the test has been graded. I felt something I hadn't felt in 8 months, not happiness footing. What do they think they're getting? She asked. The house, the $480,000, and a cheap room with my name on it. Ruth almost smiled. And what do you want? I thought about the compass on my dresser. Go somewhere, Nell. I want it where they can't reach it, I said, and I want to disappear. Can a person my age still do that? Honey, Ruth said, picking her pen back up. People do it every day. Let's do it right. Ruth laid out the plan like I used to lay out a proof on the board, one clean line at a time. Step 1, we move the inheritance the day it clears straight into a discretionary trust. You're the beneficiary. You control it through me as trustee if you want a wall between you and them. The key word is discretionary. The money never lands in an account with your name sitting out in the open for someone to help you with. It can't be commingled. It can't become marital property. Chad cannot touch it. Bree cannot touch it, and no amount of we changes that. Step 2. The house goes into the trust too. It stops being a thing anyone can talk you into signing over at a Sunday dinner because it won't be yours to sign. It'll be the trust's, and the trust answers to one person. Step 3. We update your will and your power of attorney today. Right now, Chad is likely angling to become your financial POA. We make sure that never happens. We name me or a neutral party. We strip the whole family out of the controls. I asked the question that mattered to me most. Can I set something aside for Ivy the little one? None of this is her fault. We can build her a separate education trust, Ruth said. Funded by you, controlled by a trustee that her parents cannot raid. She gets college. They get nothing to skim. She wrote it down. That's the kindest revenge there is, Helen. You take care of the innocent one in a way the guilty ones can't touch. Do it, I said. There's one more thing, Ruth said. Where are you going to go? While Ruth built the trust, the family got bolder the way people do when they think the finish line is close. Chad left a folder on the kitchen counter by accident. Inside were forms with little colored flags where I was meant to sign. A transfer on death designation. Something about adding Bree to the deed for simplicity. He didn't mention them out loud. He just left them where a tired, agreeable woman might pick up a pen. Bree took the soft approach. She'd sit close, take my hand and say, Mom, Chad and I just want to protect you. If anything happened to you, we'd want everything to be easy. You've had such a hard year. She'd actually tear up. She was good. I'd raised her to be good at a lot of things. I hadn't meant for this to be one of them. Patrice took the firm approach. Helen, I'll be honest because someone has to be. You can't run a house and an estate alone at your age. Let the kids take the wheel, sign things over while you still can, and enjoy your retirement. Enjoy my retirement at Pinewood in the shared room. I said versions of, I'll look at it and you're so thoughtful and let me think. And every night, I drove the forms over to Ruth, who photographed them, made notes, and slid them into a file labeled in her driveway exhibit. They're documenting their own intent, she said. Undue influence in their own handwriting. If they ever try to challenge anything, this folder ends them. I wasn't planning to fight them in court, but it was nice to know I could. A woman likes to have options, even the ones she doesn't intend to use. The where had an answer. It had had an answer for 30 years. I just stopped letting myself say it. Harbor Cove, a small town up on the lake, 3 hours north where Gerald and I spent a week every summer for most of our marriage. White clapboard houses, a working harbor, a bakery that opened at 6 o'clock. We always said we'd retire there. We'd point at a little place near the water and say, that one, someday. Then Gerald got sick and someday became a word we stopped using. After he died, I couldn't even drive past the lake road. But sitting in Ruth's office with my sister's compass heavy in my coat pocket, I'd started carrying it. I don't know why. Harbor Cove stopped being a grief and started being a destination. Go somewhere, Nell. Marguerite had spent her whole life refusing to wait for permission. She went to Lisbon alone at 60. She bought a one-way ticket to Patagonia and figured out the return later. And here I was 70 with her money clearing into my hands, letting a 39-year-old and her husband decide which wing of a facility I'd be filed away in. My sister would have been ashamed of me lovingly, but ashamed. That night, I took the compass off my dresser and held it in the dark and let the needle find north, which from my bedroom pointed more or less toward the lake, toward Harbor Cove, toward a white house with someday written on it. I made a phone call the next morning, not to my daughter, to a rental agent 3 hours north about a little place near the water that I happened to know was empty. The little white house wasn't the exact one Gerald and I used to point at. That one belongs to somebody happy. I hope, but it was 2 streets over and close enough to make my throat tight. 2 bedrooms, a porch, a view of the harbor if you leaned. The agent, a kind woman named Deb, walked me through it on a video call while I sat in my car in a grocery store parking lot. The one place I could be sure no one in my house was listening. 6-month lease to start, Deb said. Owner's open to selling if it suits you. It suits me, I said. I paid the deposit and first month from an account Chad didn't know existed, a small one Gerald and I had kept for emergencies. And what was this if not an emergency? I had Deb mail the key to a P.O. box I'd opened across town under my maiden name. Marguerite's name, really. Davenport was Gerald's. The maiden name was mine and my sister's, and it felt right to disappear back into it. When the key came, I held it next to the compass. 2 small, heavy things, and I understood that I had, very quietly, built myself an exit. Nobody in that house had any idea. Bree was choosing paint colors for what she assumed would soon be her dining room. Chad was flagging more forms. Patrice was asking when the money cleared. And I was a woman with a key to a white house by a lake mailed to a name they'd never think to look under, sitting in a parking lot feeling for the first time since Gerald died, like a person with a future instead of a balance. I learned the date of their ambush the way I'd learned everything important that spring by accident through carelessness because they'd stopped seeing me as a person who could hear. I was on the porch. Chad and Patrice were just inside the screen door, and they used that low voice people use when they think low means private. Sunday. Patrice said, "Do it Sunday with everyone there. She won't make a scene in front of company." "I've got the forms ready," Chad said. "Deed transfer the POA. The account authorization. She'll sign whatever we put in front of her. Mom signs things. She always has." "Get a notary," Patrice said. "My friend Sandra makes it official, makes it final. Once it's notarized, she can't undo it without a fight, and she won't fight." "And the inheritance clears Friday," Chad said, satisfied. "Perfect timing. Money and papers signed, and by July she's at Pinewood, and this is our house. She'll sign whatever we put in front of her." I sat very still on that porch with my sister's compass in my pocket, and I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because they were so sure. They'd built an entire future on the assumption that I was a signature with a pulse. Sunday, a notary named Sandra, the whole family as an audience to pressure a quiet old woman into giving away her life with a smile. They thought they'd picked the perfect stage. They had. They just didn't know whose play it was going to be. I went inside and asked Bree sweetly what I could make for Sunday dinner. She lit up. "Oh, Mom, don't worry about a thing. Just be there. It's going to be special." "I'm sure it will," I said. 2 days before their Sunday, I found the whole plan laid out on paper, and one detail in it took the last soft thing out of me. Chad had left his laptop open on the kitchen table screen, still glowing while he went to take a call in the yard. I wasn't snooping. I was wiping the table. But a folder of documents was open on the screen, and a stack of fresh printouts sat right beside it, still warm from the printer. And a mother's eye goes where it goes. There it was. A quitclaim deed. My name typed in the grantor line, Bree in the grantee line, ready for my signature to hand them my house. A transfer on death form for my accounts. A power of attorney naming Chad. All of it printed, flagged, stacked in the order I'd be expected to sign. And underneath the stack, a glossy trifold brochure. Pinewood Senior Living. Affordable assisted living for every budget. Someone had gone through it with a pen. They'd circled a room, not one of the bright ones in the front with the bay windows. A room in the back, the shared one. In the margin, in Bree's round handwriting, 2 words. Mom's room. I stood there holding a dish towel, and I looked at my daughter's handwriting circling the cheapest room in a place I'd never agreed to go. And I felt the last bit of guilt I'd been carrying. The small voice that kept whispering, "Maybe you're overreacting. Maybe they mean well." Go quiet for good. They had measured me for a shared room while smiling at me across my own table. They had priced my remaining years and chosen the budget option. I took out my phone. I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I photographed every page, the way Ruth had taught me. And I emailed the lot to her with one line. "Sunday's the day. Notary named Sandra. Let's be ready." Then I finished wiping the table. It was, after all, still my table. Ruth and I finished everything the Thursday before their Sunday. The timing was a gift. The inheritance was set to clear Friday, and the moment it did, it would flow straight into the trust, never touching open water. I sat in her office and signed the real papers, not the ones in Chad's flagged stack. Mine. I signed the trust that swallowed the house and the money and put a wall around both. I signed the new will that left everything on my death to a trust for Ivy and a list of charities Marguerite would have liked, and not $1 to Bree or Chad in any form they could control. I signed the power of attorney naming Ruth. I signed the education trust for Ivy, funded that day, locked away from her parents' reach. Chad had been right about one thing. I did sign whatever was put in front of me that week. I just signed it at my lawyer's desk instead of his. When I got home, I went up to the closet and took down Gerald's good hard shell suitcase, the anniversary trip suitcase. I set it open on my bed and I started slowly to choose. Not much. Clothes for a cooler climate. Photographs. Gerald's reading glasses, the compass, a box of letters. The things that were mine that no one in that house would miss because they'd never once looked at them. One suitcase 70 years and the part worth keeping fit in one suitcase, and I found that didn't make me sad. It made me feel light. I slid it back into the closet, packed and waiting behind the towels. 2 more days, then Sunday, then the lake. The hardest part of leaving was 8 years old and called the compass treasure. That Friday evening, Ivy climbed into my lap on the porch while the adults talked money inside. She had the compass in her small hands, turning it, watching the needle swing back to north no matter how she spun it. "It always finds the way," she said, amazed. "The way only a child can be amazed by something true." "It does," I said. "That's the whole point of it. You can get turned all the way around and it still knows which way is home." "Are you sad, Grandma?" she asked out of nowhere, the way children ask the only question that matters. "You have a sad face sometimes now." I looked at her, and for one moment, my whole careful plan wobbled, because leaving them meant leaving her, and she was the one person in that house who'd never asked me for a thing except to explain the moon. "I'm not sad, sweetheart," I said, and I meant it. "I'm getting ready for an adventure, and I'm making sure you get one too someday. A big one, I promise." She didn't understand. She just hugged me. Then, through the screen door, I heard Bree's voice talking to Chad, not knowing the porch could hear. Honestly, she's been a good little ATM this year. Free childcare, free rent. Sunday we cash out. A good little ATM. And whatever guilt I had left about leaving the last thread of it snapped clean. I kissed the top of Ivy's head. I would protect her. I would not stay to be cashed out. Those were two different promises, and I could keep them both. The night before Sunday, Bree came into my room to tuck me into my own ambush. She sat on the edge of my bed like she used to when she was small, and I was the one doing the tucking. She took my hand. She was wearing the soft voice, the one with tears already loaded. "Mom tomorrow's going to be really special. The whole family together, and there's some paperwork we should take care of. Just boring estate stuff, nothing to stress about. Chad's got it all organized. We just want everything to be safe for you. You trust us, right?" There it was. The whole con in 4 sentences delivered by the daughter I'd taught to ride a bike wearing a face I'd kissed 1,000 times. I looked at her. I'm not going to pretend there wasn't grief in it. You can know exactly what someone is and still mourn what they were supposed to be. "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "I'll be there. I wouldn't miss it." She smiled relieved and kissed my forehead and told me to sleep well and went out feeling like she'd closed the deal. She had no idea she just confirmed the time and place of her own undoing, in a soft voice holding my hand. After she left, I lay in the dark and looked at the closet where the packed suitcase waited behind the towels. I thought about the White House by the lake and the key under my sister's name. I thought calmly that tomorrow I would let them set their whole stage, walk to the center of it, and read them the one number they'd never thought to check. Then I slept very well. By Sunday morning, every piece was in place, and the strange thing was how calm I felt. Not nervous settled. The way you feel when the proof is finished and you're just waiting to write the last line on the board. The inheritance had cleared Friday exactly as Chad predicted and flowed straight into the trust by Saturday morning exactly as Ruth had arranged. The $480,000 my family had been so patiently waiting for had already passed through their fingers without ever touching their hands. The house was the trust's. The will was rewritten. Ivy's future was locked in a box only kindness could open, and a hard-shell suitcase sat packed behind the towels. I taught math for 34 years. I know the difference between a number that loves you and a number that's only waiting for you. My family had been looking at me like the second kind for months. A balance about to clear, a sum to be collected. If anyone watching this has ever felt their own children look at them and see a total instead of a person, then stay with me. Because Sunday dinner is about to be served, and I want you to see what happens when the balance they were waiting on decides to close her own account. Subscribe and stay till the end. I got dressed carefully that morning. Not for them, for Gerald and for Marguerite and for the version of me that used to point at a White House and say, "Someday." Then I put the compass in my pocket, picked up a plain folder of my own, and went downstairs to my daughter's celebration. It was going to be a celebration just not hers. They had set a beautiful table. I'll give them that. Bree can stage a room. The good cloth, the candles, flowers from the grocery store fanned out like an occasion. Both families came. Chad's side filled half my dining room. Patrice and Pearl's an aunt or two. And a brisk woman I didn't recognize sitting near the end with a leather folder and a little stamp case. Sandra the notary. They hadn't even tried to hide her well. They'd seated her like a party guest who happened to bring official ink. Ivy sat next to me, swinging her feet, delighted by the candles. Dinner was pleasant in the way a play is pleasant before the gun goes off. Bree was radiant hostessing. Chad kept catching Patrice's eye. Everyone was warm to me, warmer than they'd been in months. The particular warmth people show a person right before they ask her for everything. "We're just so glad you're part of this family, Helen," Patrice said, patting my hand. "Today's about taking care of you." "That's lovely," I said. "Thank you." I ate my dinner. I complimented the roast. I let them have their pleasant hour because I'm not cruel and because timing is everything, and a teacher knows you don't hand back the test until the whole class has settled and gone quiet and is sure of its answers. Then dessert came out, and Bree gave Chad a little nod, and Chad cleared his throat and reached under his chair and brought up a thick folder and slid it across the tablecloth toward me, past the candles with a smile I'd been watching him practice for 2 weeks. "Mom," he said. "While we're all together, just a little housekeeping." The folder sat on the cloth in front of me. Chad uncapped a pen and set it beside the folder, helpful as a waiter. "Nothing scary," he said to the table performing for both families now. "Helen's had a hard year and we want to make sure everything is protected. Just some estate paperwork. The house, the accounts, getting it all organized so nobody has to worry." "So smart to handle it now," Patrice said warmly to the room. Bree reached over and squeezed my hand. "We love you, Mom. We just want you safe." Down the table, Sandra the notary opened her little stamp case. I looked at the folder. I didn't open it. I knew what was in it better than they did. I'd photographed the whole thing off Chad's laptop 2 days before. The quitclaim deed, the transfer on death, the POA naming Chad. My house and my money and my voice flagged for signature in colored tabs. Every face at that table was turned to me. Friendly, expectant. Certain. The doormat had been led to the center of the room, and now she would do what doormats do: lie flat. Let everyone wipe their feet and call it love. "You want me to sign these?" I said pleasantly. "Today with Sandra here to make it official." "Just to protect you," Bree said. I folded my hands on the cloth. "Before I sign anything, I'd like to show you all something first. It'll only take a minute." I reached down and brought up my own plain folder and set it on the table beside Chad's thick one. I had a busy week, too. A flicker crossed Chad's face the first crack. The smile held, but his eyes had started very slightly to calculate. I opened my folder slowly, the way I used to hand back exams, calm, unhurried, letting the silence do the teaching. "I taught high school math for 34 years, I said to the table conversational. Some of you know that. What that means is I have never in my life signed something I hadn't already worked out. You don't put your name on an answer you haven't checked. I taught that to about 3,000 teenagers. I'd be a poor teacher if I didn't follow it myself." "Mom, it's really just routine," Bree started. "I know exactly what it is." "It is, sweetheart," I said gently, and something in my tone stopped her. "I've read every page. I read them on Thursday. I read them on Chad's laptop, actually, while it was sitting open on the kitchen table. I let that land. I'm a very good reader." The table had gone quiet in a different way now. The pleasant hum was gone. Chad's jaw tightened. "Helen, I don't know what you think you saw. I saw a quitclaim deed putting my house in Bree's name. I saw a power of attorney putting my accounts in yours. I saw a transfer on death form, and I saw a brochure for Pinewood Senior Living with the shared room in the back, circled in Bree's handwriting. I looked at my daughter. Mom's room, it said. You have lovely penmanship, Bree. I always told your teachers that. Bree's face had gone the color of the tablecloth. So I said, and I took the first page out of my own folder. Before I sign your housekeeping, let me show you mine. Because while you were all waiting for the inheritance to clear, I was clearing a few things of my own. I laid the pages out one at a time facing them. The way you deal cards, you weren't afraid to show. This is a trust, I said. Signed Thursday in my attorney's office. As of Saturday morning, it holds two things. The first is my sister Marguerite's inheritance, $480,000. It cleared probate Friday. You were right about the date, Chad. Well done. And it flowed directly into this trust without ever touching an account any of you could reach. It is discretionary. It cannot be commingled. It cannot become marital property. In plain English, there is nothing left to clear into your joint account because it is already cleared into a wall. Nobody spoke. Sandra the notary quietly closed her stamp case. The second thing the trust holds, I went on, is this house. Gerald left it to me alone, free and clear. As of Thursday, it belongs to the trust, which means it is not mine to sign over to anyone at this table today or ever. The quitclaim deed in that folder is a blank with nowhere to go. Chad stood up. You can't just, I can. And I did, and it's done, and it's recorded. I said, not raising my voice at all. You're welcome to have a lawyer read it. I'd recommend not using the one you were going to use on me. Patrice's pearls had stopped moving at her throat. The aunts were staring at their dessert, and Bree was looking at me with an expression I hadn't seen on her since she was a little girl caught in a lie. The face of someone realizing the adult in the room was paying attention the whole time. I picked up the next page. There's one more thing you should see. I reached into my folder and took out a copy of their own brochure, the Pinewood one, and laid it in the middle of the table where both families could see the circled room and the round handwriting. Mom's room, I read aloud, tapping it, the shared one in the back, the cheaper wing. I looked up and down the table at Chad's relatives who'd come for a pleasant Sunday and gotten this instead. I want everyone here to understand what tonight was. My daughter and her husband invited 2 families to dinner to watch me sign away my house and my savings, and then they were going to move me into that room. They'd already chosen it. They'd already priced it. They circled it in pen. An aunt at the end made a small sound and put down her fork. I'm not telling you this to embarrass you, Bree, I said, and I meant it. I'm telling you because you did it at a table full of witnesses, and the thing done in front of witnesses should be answered in front of them. You wanted an audience to pressure me. Fine, the audience can hear all of it. You went through my things, Chad said, grasping. You left your laptop open on my kitchen table in my house plotting to take my house, I said. We can compare whose week looks worse to Sandra if you'd like. She's right there. Sandra was already gathering her coat. I set the brochure down gently on the cloth next to the candles Bree had lit for her celebration. You picked my room, I said quietly. So I picked one too. You're never going to see it. That's when the pleasant evening finally tore down the middle and the yelling started, and not one bit of it came from my end of the table. This is insane. Chad was on his feet now, loud, the helpful waiter gone. After everything we've done for her, we moved in. We took care of everything. You moved into my house and opened my mail, I said. We gave up our lives for you. Bree's voice cracked, climbing. We took care of you all year. I looked at my daughter and I said the thing I'd carried up the stairs from the kitchen that night in April, the thing I'd held quietly for 2 weeks while I did my math. I heard you, Bree, I said. Through the kitchen wall the Thursday in April, you told Chad I was useful until the inheritance clears. Then you laughed. The table went dead silent. Even Chad stopped. Bree's mouth opened. You don't understand. You were just being honest for once when you thought I couldn't hear, I said. It's the most honest thing you've said to me since your father died. Useful until the inheritance clears. I let it sit in the air over the candles. Well, the inheritance is cleared, sweetheart. It cleared Friday. And it turns out I'm not useful anymore because I'm not staying to be used. I stood up from the table slowly. 70 years old, and my knees aren't what they were, but I stood up straight and the whole room watched me do it. Ivy, I said softly to the little girl beside me, give Grandma a hug. I have to go on my adventure now. Chad made one last grab at control the way men like Chad do when the floor tilts. You can't just walk out. We'll contest this. You're not competent to make these decisions. A court will see that. I almost laughed. Chad, I said, and I kept my voice exactly level, which is the most powerful thing you can do in a room where everyone else is shouting. You told Patrice I'd sign whatever you put in front of me. Mom signs things you said. Do you remember I watched it register that I'd heard that too? You were right. I signed everything this week. The trust, the will, the power of attorney. The deed into the trust, a college fund for Ivy that you will never, ever be able to touch. I picked up the pen he'd set out for me, the helpful pen, and I set it down on his thick folder of papers, gently like returning something borrowed. I signed all of it, I said. Just none of it for you. He had no answer. There isn't one. You cannot argue with a woman who did her homework in front of witnesses with a lawyer's seal on every page. The shouting is just noise the losing side makes to fill the silence where their plan used to be. Patrice tried weakly, "After all we did for you, Helen. You measured me for a shared room, Patrice," I said. "Let's not pretend this was charity." And then I did the thing none of them expected, because they'd spent a year being certain I'd never do anything at all. I bent down and I hugged my granddaughter and I picked up my coat. At the door, I turned around once, not for drama, because some things should be said to faces. "I want to tell you where this came from so you understand it isn't cruelty," I said. The room was quiet now. The fight drained out of it, both families just watching the old woman at the door. My sister Marguerite worked 40 years for that money. She never married, never had children, never once let anyone tell her to sit down and wait her turn. She sent me postcards my whole life with 3 words on them. "Go somewhere, Nell." I never did. I always had a reason to stay a person to take care of a silence to fill. I touched the compass in my pocket. She left me that money so I could finally go somewhere not so the 2 of you could buy a bigger house and file me into a smaller one. I looked at Bree. "Your father and I had a place we loved. We used to point at a little white house and say, 'Someday.' Then he died, and I let someday die with him, and I let you move into the leftover quiet and start measuring it for resale." I shook my head. I'm done waiting to be cleared like a check. I'm going to go be a person for whatever years I've got left. That's all this is. It's not revenge. It's a woman finally taking her sister's advice. "Mom," Bree said and took a step. "I left a letter on your pillow," I said, "and one for Ivy for when she's older. Read yours carefully. It's the kindest thing I had left to give you, and it's the last." Bree was crying now, and I made myself look closely at it because I needed to know which kind it was. I'd taught teenagers for 34 years. I know the difference between a child crying because she's sorry and a child crying because she's been caught. I watched my daughter's tears, and I waited to feel the old pull, the one that had run my whole life. Fix it. Soften it. Make her feel better even as she takes from you. "Mom, please," she said. "Please don't do this. We can talk about the money." "We can figure out the money." "Even now, please don't do." This was followed in the very same breath by the money. And that told me everything. The pull didn't come. For the first time in 39 years, my daughter cried in front of me, and I felt only a clear, quiet sadness. And underneath it, something that felt almost like freedom. "You were right about one thing, sweetheart," I said, my hand on the door. "You said I was useful until the inheritance cleared." I gave her the smallest smile. "The inheritance cleared on Friday, and so it turns out, did I?" I opened the door to my own house, the house that was now safe inside a wall she'd never climb, and I walked out into the spring evening, and I did not look back a second time. 1 look was the gift. 2 would have been a debt I no longer owed. Behind me, I could hear Chad starting up again and Patrice and the scrape of chairs, the sound of a plan coming apart. It is a very particular music. I let the screen door close on it. I didn't drive to the lake that night. I'm 70. I don't do 3-hour drives in the dark on the strength of adrenaline. I checked into a quiet hotel across town under Marguerite's name, and I slept better than I had in months. But before I left the house, there was one more thing. In the driveway, Ivy had run out after me, the way children do, not understanding the grown-up war behind her, only that her grandmother was leaving. She wrapped her arms around my waist. "Are you coming back?" she asked. I knelt down my knees, protesting, and I held her by the shoulders. "Not to live, sweetheart," I said. "But listen to me. When you're 18, there's going to be money for you for college, for whatever you want. It's locked up safe in your name where nobody can spend it but you. A lawyer named Miss Castellano, you'll like her, will make sure you get it. That's your adventure, and it's already paid for. You understand?" She did not really, but she nodded. "The compass finds the way home," I told her. "You remember that. And home isn't always the house you started in." I pressed something into her hand. It was the postcard, the one of Harbor Cove I'd carried all spring, the white houses, and the little harbor. On the back, I'd written nothing but 3 words. "Go somewhere, Ivy." I kissed her forehead, and I stood up, and I left her on the lawn with her parents' ruined dinner behind her, and I drove away. And that was the hardest and the only hard part of the whole thing. Here is what I learned later in pieces, mostly through Ruth, because I did not give any of them a way to reach me directly. The notary Sandra left that night and apparently told Patrice's whole circle what she'd witnessed, which in a town that size is its own kind of sentence. Bree and Chad had told everyone the inheritance was as good as theirs. They'd talked about the new house. Now they had to untell it, which is the most expensive thing a proud person ever has to do. They went to a lawyer, of course. The lawyer told them what Ruth already knew. A discretionary trust properly drawn, signed by a competent woman with her own counsel, and a folder full of their handwriting proving undue influence is a wall you do not get over. Competent was the word that ended it. They'd planned to argue, I wasn't of sound mind. The trust, the will, the rental, the P.O. box, the careful timing, all of it was the work of a very sound mind indeed. No court was going to look at that paperwork and call me confused. They couldn't touch the money. They couldn't touch the house, which I let them keep living and oddly enough paying rent to the trust until their lease ran out. Ruth's idea, and a good one. Let them write a check to my wall every month. They couldn't touch Ivy's fund. The inheritance they'd waited for all year cleared into a place they would never see held by a woman they'd never find for a child they couldn't reach. And I was 3 hours north by then in a White House listening to a harbor instead of a wall. Bree tried to find me. I'll give her that much effort. She called Ruth's office. She emailed the old address. She even drove the county looking for my car, which she did not find because it was registered now under a trust and parked behind a white house on a street she'd never heard me mention. She posted online for a little while about her mother's mental decline and how worried she was. The caught child's last move, rewriting the story so she is the hero. It didn't take. People who'd watched her post family is. Everything all year had also heard from Sandra what the family dinner had actually been. She wrote me one letter that Ruth forwarded 2 pages. I read it standing at my new kitchen window with the harbor going gray in the evening. The first page was an apology. The second page asked about the money. That's how I knew nothing had changed and that I'd been right to go. A real apology doesn't come with a second page. Grief, regret, love, those in the letter. Only one thing ever makes a person keep writing past I'm sorry, and it isn't love. I didn't write back, not out of spite. There was simply nothing left to say to a person who was still even now doing the math on me. I keep the letter in a drawer, page 1 anyway. I threw page 2 in the harbor. It seemed like the right place for it. Let me go back to that first morning because it's the picture I want you to keep. The morning after the dinner, before I drove north, I went back to the house one last time while they were still asleep upstairs, sleeping off the wreckage. I'd called a locksmith the week before and scheduled him for 7 a.m. He was waiting in the driveway when I pulled up. He changed every lock on the house in 40 minutes. New keys, all of which went into the trust file, none of which went to Bree or Chad. They were tenants now, and tenants get keys when the trustee says so. The house was a wall, and I'd just changed the gate. Then I went up the back stairs quiet as I'd learned to be that spring, and I took the one packed suitcase out of the closet behind the towels. Gerald's good hard shell case, 70 years inside it, and it wasn't even heavy. I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that because it's the line I'd kept since April. I didn't cry. I packed one suitcase. I carried it down the stairs of the house I'd loved and saved and finally protected, and I set it in the trunk and I closed the lid, and by morning I was gone. The White House by the lake is smaller than the one I left, and it is entirely mine, and that is the best math I've ever done. I bought it outright in the fall when the lease turned into a sale with my sister's money, which is exactly what she'd have wanted. There's a porch where I drink my coffee and watch the boats. The bakery still opens at 6 o'clock. I've made 2 friends, a widow named Joan and a retired ferry captain who flirts terribly and badly. I have not been to a single dinner where anyone slid a folder across the table. The compass sits on the kitchen windowsill, pointed as it happens back south toward the people I left. I don't mind that it points that way. A compass doesn't tell you to go home. It just tells you the truth about where things are. Home is south. I'm north. Both of those are facts I can live with. Marguerite's postcard frame hangs by the door empty now because I gave the postcard to Ivy. Someday, she'll find Harbor Cove on a map and understand. Someday she'll have her own money and her own compass and nobody's permission to ask for. I'm not estranged from my whole family. I want to be honest about that because the internet likes a clean ending and life doesn't give you one. Ivy and I write letters, real ones, on paper through Ruth, so her parents can't intercept them. She draws me the lake from memory. I send her math puzzles she pretends to hate. When she's old enough to drive, she knows there's a white house and a porch waiting and a college fund that's already hers. Brie. I keep at the end of a long arm. Low contact, the counselors call it. One card at Christmas, sent through the lawyer, no address, no visits. The door is open exactly the width of a granddaughter and not 1 inch wider. You can come back into my life. I wrote her once, but not into my accounts. Choose which one you actually wanted and we'll talk. She hasn't answered yet. The math, I suppose, still isn't working out for her. They spent a whole year waiting for one number to clear, and they never once noticed that the woman attached to it had quietly decided to spend the rest of her life being far more than a balance. And the day their number finally came in was the same morning mine walked out the door for good. That's my story. If the people you love have started treating your love like a balance about to clear, pack the one suitcase. Choose yourself. You're allowed. Do it today. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.